Yeah, so today's session is quite a practical session where we will look at how we set up Beyond Pricing and answer lots of your questions. Pleased to be joined by Jess and Jessie from Beyond Pricing, who are the team here to help you through today. And I'm here to answer any questions that might have from the SuperControl side. So I will hand over to Jess, who will sort of take you through the session. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Robert. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, great. As Robert mentioned, my name's Jess and I'm the Director of Customer Experience here at Beyond Pricing for Europe. And I've been with Beyond Pricing for several years now and always in roles that focus on the product and the customer and helping the customer get the most out of the product. I'm originally from Australia, spent 10 years in San Francisco, currently in Lisbon. So if my accent dips in and out of some weird influences, please bear with me. But I'm really excited to be here today to take you through some really practical steps with Beyond Pricing and answer any questions that you have. And on that note, please do feel free to submit questions throughout. Robert and Jessie will be monitoring them as well. And yeah, happy to pause at any point to answer questions. So as far as what to expect from this session, today I'm going to talk a little bit about how Beyond Pricing works in general, and then we're going to jump straight into my account and see dynamic pricing in action. I'm going to take you through how you can adjust certain things in Beyond Pricing to make sure that you maintain control over your suggested prices, and then obviously address any common questions that have come up in the past, and then any that come up as we move through. So let's jump on in. Basically, let's talk a little bit first about dynamic pricing and what we do at Beyond Pricing. So dynamic pricing is essentially adjusting rates based on changes in supply and demand that we see in a market. So it's just like you would see for an airline in regular times, and if we're going away on trips, to fly at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday is usually cheaper than to fly at 5 p.m. on a Friday because the demand is different. So the same thing happens with short lets. I'm sure many of you have weekday and weekend prices or, high season and low season prices, which is great. But the good thing about Beyond Pricing is we can automate that part for you. And then the other place where we can really add value is by dealing with any anomalies that fall outside of, weekend, weekday, high season, low season. And I think if we've learned anything from 2020, we've learned that we need to be able to cater to and plan around the anomalies. So that's where Beyond Pricing can really help. So what we do here is we take a look at data from numerous sources to help come up with accurate prices for properties. So we actually examine over 5 billion data points daily across all the major OTAs and booking sites such as Airbnb, Vrbo, Expedia, Booking.com. And so what we do is we take that information and we feed it into the algorithm to power the suggestions on where to increase rates for high demand dates, such as a bank holiday weekend, for example, and then maybe decrease rates or increase occupancy during shoulder or low season. So this combination of increasing and decreasing rates ultimately helps owners and agencies and property managers increase their revenue. So we have the largest data science and revenue management team in the industry, which is always key to helping get the right prices, but it's especially important at the moment as we examine where demand trends are falling in line with previous years and then where they're deviating. Because, if we were relying just on 2020 data, then things would be all over the place. So having this team that's focused on this is really important. Our product is really clean and functional, and it's a really easy way to set rates. So as I mentioned, our revenue management team, they are also responsible for hyper-local markets. And so they'll hand launch each of these regions to make sure that we have the most accurate pricing possible. We also surface a lot of the data that we use to make pricing decisions behind the scenes in the tool for you at the listing level. at the portfolio level and then at the market level. And we have a great support team. You know, we have a very customer first focus at Beyond Pricing, and so we're always here to help. So that's a bit about Beyond Pricing, but let's jump in and take a look. So we're going to start by connecting a SuperControl account and then sort of navigating around Beyond Pricing. And we're going to start with the calendar and sort of look at all of the factors that we can see there. So I'm going to jump on in to my account. So here we can see link an account page, and I'm actually going to link my SuperControl account. So if you click in here, it'll ask you for your SuperControl client key. So I'm going to go into my SuperControl account. If you go to integrations, price optimization, and Beyond Pricing, you'll see my key is right here. So I'm going to grab this key, just copy it and paste it in here and click link. And while this is linking, I just want to come back here and take a quick look here. Robert, do you want to explain the difference between enabling your listings here and the impact that that has? Oh, I can't hear you.
That's because I was muted. I sneezed and muted. Yeah, so before you copy your key over into Beyond Pricing, you'll need to enable at least one property for the connection, which you do by clicking that button that says enable. Once it is enabled, at that point in time, we take a snapshot of the prices that were in SuperControl at that point in time. And if you want to, then you can revert back to them. But by clicking enabled, you are just purely making this property available in our integration to Beyond Pricing. You're not going to change prices or anything by clicking the button there. So you may want to experiment with a few properties or enable quite a few and bring them over to Beyond Pricing. But it is important for it to work. You need to enable at least one property.
And this is a great point, actually. Thank you, Robert. You can enable all of them if you want to bring them over, and then you can see them in Beyond Pricing. By enabling it, it doesn't mean you have to enable syncing to use dynamic pricing in Beyond Pricing. So if you bring the properties over, you'll have access to a lot of the information, the historical information in like the stats tab, for example, that we're going to have a look at. So up to you, but yeah, you can also bring them all over and use some of that without even using dynamic pricing. Okay, cool. So here you can see we have connected our SuperControl account and we're here on our dashboard. So before I go any further, there's a couple of things I want to show you here. So first of all, I encourage you to get into the habit of every time you log in, clicking this load stats button. And what this will do is just refresh to make sure that all of this information here is as up to date as possible. So you can see we've loaded the stats, which is great. Here, if you haven't already, or if it doesn't come set this way, I recommend switching it to English UK. This will make the dates and the calendars much easier to read. And then I also recommend here, if you click in here, you can see all of your account settings. So this is where you'll see sort of your billing information. And if you haven't enabled syncing yet here, there'll be a currency drop down here. So you can come in here and adjust it. The default will be US dollars. So you can change it to pounds or euros or whatever you need it to be. Here as well, we have a direct link to our support center where we have some great documentation to help guide you through how to use the product. Let's go back here to our dashboard. Great. So here we can see all of our properties that we've pulled through from SuperControl into our dashboard. So now we are going to jump on into one. Excellent. Okay, so let's take a look at the calendar. So here we can see any day where the color is a lighter blue or green or teal indicates a date where the suggested price is below the base price. Any date where it is a darker green, blue, or teal is a price that is above the base price. So what is the base price? The base price is essentially the middle price or the average price for your listing throughout the year. So you could take the price that you charge in summer and the price that you charge in winter, meet in the middle, and that would be where your starting base price is. So this is the starting point for all of our pricing fluctuations. So if we take a look at this date, for example, we can see with a base price of £143, where decreasing for seasonality because it's late April, early May, so it's not into high season yet. We're increasing because it is the early May bank holiday weekend, so demand has increased because of the event. And then we're also increasing pricing for the day of the week because here we're looking at a Friday. So all of these factors come together to give us the predicted price, or the price that we would suggest for that night, of £163. So we found that these are the main factors that influence pricing trends in an area. So if we change this, for example, to, let's say, £155, we can now see that the suggested rate has increased to £176. So off the base of £155, we're now decreasing by £13 for seasonality, increasing by £26 for the event, and then also increasing by £8 because it's a Friday. So that's where you can see what changing the base price, the impact that it has on any day of the week. You can hover over it and see the factors that go into it. So I'm going to go back to my base price of £143. Let's say there's a date where you really wanted to set a specific price. Let's go down to the marathon, the Loch Ness Marathon. And let's say you want to charge £500 a night. Your property is right by the start line, or you think you want to see if you can hold out to get booked at a really, really high price. You can drag across these dates, come down here to manual override, set the price to £500 and click save. So the way you'll be able to see this on the calendar is that it'll be orange and it will have this lock symbol. So what this means is you've manually overridden the price, and now it will not change in line with the demand trends that we see in the market. If you decide you want to remove it, you can highlight it, click clear manual overrides, and you're done. If we come back up here for a moment too, you can see these ones in green. So these are successful bookings. So if we take a look, let's see, at this one here, for example, we can see that the booking came in on the 22nd of February to stay for this week in May. And the reservation total is £1,364. And then we break it down by the average daily rate. So you'll hear us talk a lot about ADR, which is a bit of a switch if you're used to thinking of things in kind of weekly pricing. But what we do is we would take the price that we get for the booking, so the weekly price, and then divide it by 7, basically average out what the daily rate would be if you were to book any individual night. So this is how we look at a lot of statistics, is by looking at occupancy and ADR, or average daily rate. If you did want to see what the weekly price would be, for example, to check in Saturday to Saturday, you would click starting on Saturday, drag for 7 nights, and then you can see here on the side we have 7 nights, and so then the weekly price would be £1,025. And then the average daily rate would be £146. So some nights are above, some nights are below, but on average we're at £146. Then the one other thing you can see in the calendar is a block. Where did that go? I know we have a block in here. Here it is. So dates that are blocked for an owner stay or maintenance, for example, will show up like this in the calendar. So the calendar is a great place to see sort of week-long stays or specific dates, but I really like going into the chart tab, which we'll do next here. And this is what you can see. Here you can see the predicted price for the next 365 days at our current base price. So before we were looking at the marathon weekend, so at a base price of £143. The Saturday, we're suggesting £311 for the night. If we change that back to £155, as we were looking at earlier, the suggested price now is £338. So the other great thing you can see here too is how your minimum price is impacting the suggested price. So if we adjust the minimum price, let's say, to £130 a night, what you'll see here is with a base price of 143, so the middle price that we were talking about earlier, during high season, we'll go significantly higher than £143. But then as we come into November, December, aside from the holidays, obviously, you can see that we're hitting this minimum price throughout this lower season. And so what this is showing us is that the algorithm would like to suggest prices lower than this and is not able to do so because of the minimum price. Now, this minimum price is completely up to you, obviously, and it needs to be set at a level that helps you balance returns on your properties. But this is a great place to see the impact that the minimum price is having on our suggested pricing for the year. So I wanted to show you that too. I know some people have talked about having bad experiences, with cottages.com or Airbnb kind of driving your rates down. This is not our aim at Beyond Pricing. We have a unique model in that we work exclusively for agencies and owners. So on Airbnb, if you've ever tried smart pricing, for example, it's in their best interest for you to be 100% booked. So because that's how they make their fees. So at times they will suggest prices. They have two clients, the person looking for a place to stay and the person renting out the property. So it's in their best interest for the pricing to be lower and get booked up so they can make their fee. We are only working for hosts. And so the way we set our prices is making sure that you get booked at the best rate at the best point in time.
Jess, while you're on this screen, the base price is something, figuring out what your base price should be is something which I know we get a lot of questions on. So when you first integrate from SuperControl, it will pull some data over and probably suggest a base price, but what would your advice be for people on trying to get that right?
Yeah, and that is tough. So first of all, we're here to help. So you can always shoot us a line at support@beyondpricing.com if you want someone to double check your base price. But to Robert's point, we will pull in, when you first connect, there will be a suggested base price that is based on the historical information that we're seeing come over from SuperControl about how your listing has performed in the past. But I think the best way to start is, take your low season rate and your high season rate and literally meet in the middle and put that in, and then look at some key dates. Like if you know what you're accustomed to achieving for Christmas, like is that coming in higher or lower? In low season, what do prices look like? Do they drop down far too low, or is it much higher than you think it will be? We can also take a look at the stats tab, which I won't jump into just yet, but you can take a look there. Well, actually, let's take a look. Here you can also see some of the historical performance of your listing, as we were talking about. So you can look at things like the maximum daily rate that you've achieved for the property and see if our suggested prices are hitting that during the same time period. You can look at the average daily rate and see if that is also in line with what you expect. If our suggested prices this year are in line with what your average daily rate you achieved was last year. So there's some ways to start, but I definitely think low season, high season, taking it in the middle, and then looking at some key dates is the best place to get a starting point.
And then just to reinforce, and I know we get asked this often, those two prices are what their prices are based on. You're not basing the property's prices on anybody else's prices. It's just applying supply and demand algorithms to the prices. So the owners or the agents are in control of the pricing.
100%, exactly. These are, the starting points or like the limits for the pricing that we will use and apply the data to. I actually might just jump into the nearby listings for a moment. People see this here and sometimes assume that this is the comp set, for example, that we're looking at these listings and then basing our suggestions off the prices that others are charging in the area. This is not how Beyond Pricing works. Previously, before we had access to all of this data, the comp set was the best data that you had. You were able to see what others in your area were charging and set your prices accordingly. The issue we found with this approach is if everybody's copying one another and nobody's using data to make any of these decisions, then it's possible that we're all modeling poor behavior off our neighbors. So we have a phrase, you wouldn't want to cheat off a D student, and it's hard to know, like, is everyone adjusting their price based on what the others are doing, and it's just going around in a circle. So instead what we do is we look at the data trends. And this is why the base price is important, because it is the starting point, and then the trends that we see in the market are sort of applied on top of this. We also have lots of great tools to help you, you know, set your initial base price. Obviously we pull it in, but then teach you how to read, you know, what is happening if there are changes in the market that maybe you need to adjust your base price. Let's say, I don't know, the market is flooded with 1,000 new Airbnbs, then the supply has increased. And so it's likely that you might have to adjust your pricing strategy to reflect that. So you might not know that, and you might be sitting there saying, why isn't my property getting booked, for example? But with Beyond Pricing, we'll see that trend in the market. We'll see the supply grow, and we'll watch what the demand does accordingly and adjust your prices accordingly to be in line with what is happening. So that's why it's a more proactive rather than reactive approach of looking at what others are doing in the area. I do love this page though. There's a couple ways you can use it, but I recommend coming here and then opening the listing on Airbnb and seeing what it looks like. So you can look at the photos, see if they're in line with yours, if they're professional, the amenities they have, such as a hot tub, how many 5-star ratings they have. All of these things also influence people when they're making their booking decisions on any of these platforms. It's not just price. So all of this feeds in. And I loved, we had some people in Hawaii who had 2 listings on the same floor in the same condo complex, and they both had views of the ocean. And one was booking up at twice the price of the other one. And they couldn't work out what was going on, and we were like digging in, trying to see what was happening with the pricing. And then when we opened them up on Airbnb, we saw that the hero image, or the first image, on one was a beautiful sweeping view of the beach, and on the second one was a view of the kitchen. And so this alone was having a huge impact on people wanting to click on the listing and actually book at those prices. So, you know, all of these factors go into this as well. So the nearby listings tab is a great place to say, okay, our base price is at £143. This one's at £149. Do we look like we have a similar offering online? If so, we might be in the same ballpark.
We've got a question here, which back to our base prices and prices, which Beyond Pricing is working in daily pricing. Obviously, a large proportion of the UK self-catering market has been more used to weekly pricing with short breaks based on percentages. And I know we've worked a lot on this recently, and so maybe you could show what the results of that are, and so that they can interpret this daily pricing. And I just want to add that the daily pricing, one of the massive advantages you saw in the chart view there, those spikes all the way. So even in the space of 1 week, you've got spikes up and down, and it's that really granular approach that makes a significant difference in the revenue that you can achieve. So, you know, 1 day being priced higher is a big part of this. But yeah, explaining the how we move from a nightly pricing model to a weekly pricing model and back again.
Yeah, sure thing. Great question. I should have touched on that while we're looking at the calendar. So let's go down here. Let's go to November. Okay. Let's say you are doing weeklies with a Friday check-in, for example. So let's grab this. So the weekly rate would be, oh, my video's in top. Okay. The weekly rate would be £783. So let's say you're also offering short breaks during this time because it's the lower season. If you have set your short break percentage to 50% for a 2-night stay, for example, a 2-night stay would not be charged at 200 or would not be advertised at £258. Rather, we would take the weekly price and then take 50% of this weekly price here. So what's that? A little bit under 400, you know, £390. So that would be the price for the short night of a 2-night short break if it was priced at 50%. So it'd be £390 rather than the £258. So that's kind of how you can see it in your calendar here. I know you have to do a little bit of maths to get there. What some of our clients who use this approach do as well is up here you have this listing notes section. And so you can actually put in, you know, like 50% 2 nights, 75%, 3 nights, for example. And so you can just have this here as a quick reference for your short break. So I've helped some people. And if you do have lots and lots of listings, you can send this information through to me and I can upload it in bulk for you. So that can be a good reference point too. So you can continue to work sort of within Beyond Pricing to understand what the pricing for the short breaks would be. And actually on that note, Robert, should we go back and just take a quick look here?
So this is, yeah, sure. So this when we started working with Beyond Pricing, we worked purely in their nightly pricing model. And the feedback, really helpful feedback from some clients was, well, I think we can rent it for more, for shorter stays using the more traditional percentage model that you see here. And so we worked together on this. Essentially, Beyond Pricing is sending us the prices and we're translating them back into that percentage model. So we take their 7-night prices and calculate the short break prices. So you can set up these percentages as many of you already have, or indeed there's a button there to import them from the property settings if they're already there. When we import prices from Beyond Pricing, we'll translate the prices back into the more normal short self-catering model. Just point out, if you do change this, then the prices won't change in SuperControl until you get the next sync from Beyond Pricing. So you either need to trigger a synchronized price sync manually or wait until the next morning and then you'll get these percentage prices there. So this is a relatively recent development and we've actually got some changes to more improvements to make on that in the next few weeks. But this really helps for those shorter stays. And there's a really good help file in the Beyond Pricing documentation, which gives some guidance on the percentages that you might want to use as well. They put a lot of work into that, and so it's well worth reading. Even if you've had that pricing model in the past, you might want to slightly tweak your percentages that you use because they've put a lot of effort into researching that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. And actually that reminds me of another thing I want to touch on. You know, here we have this minimum price we've been talking about, which is a minimum nightly price. And then we also have the minimum price, I think the minimum booking value in SuperControl, which is the minimum price for a booking. So rather than for one individual night, it will be for a booking in general. So any sort of reservation. So you can use this in combination. You can set the minimum price for the daily rate in Beyond Pricing to sort of control that at one day never goes below a certain amount. But then a lot of clients are also using this minimum booking value to say, okay, well, you know, a 2 or 3 night short break, I never want it to be below £300. So I'm just going to set that as well. And then we're automatically raised to that. And then the dynamic pricing sort of kicks in beyond that.
And just to add on that, that all of your short break settings, lengths of stay, changeover days and everything, that's still controlled in SuperControl as normal. So even though you'll see prices for every single day here, it doesn't mean that you're suddenly taking 1 night bookings. Whatever model you've been used to is what you're still going to have when you move over to Beyond Pricing, and all of that is managed in SuperControl as was previously. There's a question here, which is an interesting one, since we're on base prices sort of still, from Phil. He's using Beyond Pricing. He's saying some of his prices are like 3 times his base price. Do you think that might be an indication that the base price is too low, or it's just an indication of the demand that he's seeing on those particular days?
Yeah, great question. Definitely the latter. I know I described the base price as like the middle price, so that might indicate that it's going too high. But if you were to increase that base price, it would just increase what we're looking for on those days, or the suggested pricing for those days. And this is where, you know, Beyond Pricing is a big shift, and people will have experienced it. You know, you look for a flight and you're like, oh, that looks really great, you know, £200 return trip. I'll check in with my friends and then I'll book that tomorrow. And then you come back and all of a sudden it's £350 and you're like kicking yourself that you didn't just, take the action and book yesterday. And so our swings aren't as extreme, but in general, but it's the same sort of concept. Like every day we're checking like how popular these dates are and adjusting. And what you'll see is we also actually, we need to talk about this as well. So I'll talk about it now. A lot of people also ask about opening their calendars more than 12 months in advance, which we can do at Beyond Pricing. But the reason we don't start with more than 12 months by default is because once you get out of that range, it's harder to predict. School holidays, for example, are easy, but it's harder to predict these like swings or these bumps in demand that, maybe there's a new festival that's announced or a new conference that comes to town that we don't have any historical information on. So what we'll see for those is that demand is increasing. And so we might not exactly know what it is yet, but we'll bump your prices up because we're seeing that increase in demand. And so to Phil's point, I want to come here for a moment to the market data. I'm going to toggle off last year for a moment just because it was an interesting one. What we're seeing here is if we take a look at the marathon, for example. So, in 2019, occupancy in the area arrived at 83%. So 83% of shortlets were booked. And October's still a long way away. And we're already seeing that the market is almost 50% booked. So we still have a lot of time for people to be planning to participate and travel at that time. And so this is why, for example, we're increasing the price that weekend to more than double of the base price, because we're already seeing this bump in demand and there's still a lot of time for people to book between now and October. So what you might see over time is that price might go higher or it might even come lower. So Phil, without knowing what event it is, but let's say if we see here like Christmas, for example, we can see this like what looks like a small bump on the blue line, which is what is currently booked for New Year's Eve and Christmas, is actually a significant bump. And so if we go back and look at our prices there, you'll see that we're already increasing for these dates to make sure that if people are booking those dates out far in advance, we know they're already popular, that they're going to be paying a premium for it.
I know that some people go into Beyond Pricing, set it up, and they get maybe a little bit scared off by the potential increase in pricing. But, this is really just about getting the pricing right for those dates to be booked on that day based on supply and demand. And I know from my own experience as a Beyond Pricing customer as well, we have seen significant increases in pricing from when we used to price manually for our own properties. And no one's mentioned the price. Our reviews, value for money reviews are exactly the same. It's what people are willing to pay. And it's far more sophisticated than I would say any of us, but most of us would be in our manual pricing methods. It really is getting the price right at that point in time.
And this is true. We hear sometimes some feedback from people that, they're concerned that their repeat guests are going to see these crazy prices for a year out, for example, or that like nobody will pay that price. Like in the past, people have paid half of this. And I think this is, the power of dynamic pricing. And Robert and I talk a lot about repeat guests being both a blessing and a curse. You work hard for these repeat guests and it's great to have that base. But if you have a repeat guest who's been coming for the last 10 years at the same price, at this point, they're probably a liability, a curse rather than a blessing. The likelihood that you could replace them with a new repeat guest who's willing to pay significantly more and then will continue to be a repeat guest is pretty high. So, I encourage you when thinking about your strategy for repeat guests, what we've seen with a lot of people who are using Beyond Pricing is they either, take this year's rates and add 10%, or the one I like is that they take our current suggested rates for next year and offer them a 10% decrease, for example. And the reason I like this approach is because if somebody books now for next summer, for example, they're taking your property out of the potential pool of properties that anybody looking to book to stay next summer sees. So, I know I want to go on holidays this summer and I haven't even started looking yet. So any properties that are already booked won't even be presented to me. So there's a couple of things there. It's not as good for brand awareness because I don't see your listing, but then it also shows that, yes, some people book far in advance and plan, but what we see is that a lot of people plan their holidays, especially at the moment, a lot closer to the date of stay than feels naturally comfortable. It feels great to have a calendar booked up 6 months in advance. It's great to be able to communicate with owners, what revenue you have in the door. But what happens is if you book up too much of your inventory too far in advance, then there's not enough available dates left when a lot of people are still booking. In places like San Francisco, more than 50% of bookings come in within a month of stay. So everybody, or more than half people, are booking within 30 days to stay. Now, obviously, if you have a larger home in a more rural or remote area where if there's no restrictions in place, groups are congregating to stay during the school holidays, then it makes sense that you might book up further in advance. People have to plan. But there will still be people who plan a few weeks out to go to those sorts of places. So, and the reason I wanted to touch on that too is I might jump into the Customize tab here. Some common feedback we've had from some SuperControl users is that, especially if you open your calendars up past a year, is that the prices are crazy high. And part of that is this here. So what we actually have in place here is a 30% increase after 390 days. So if we did open your calendar up for 2 years, for example, and someone was inquiring about next summer, if you were to offer them a 10% discount on the price that they're currently seeing online, it's actually a 20% increase. So it's all about how you present it. Some people like to remove these. I recommend leaving them in as a safeguard as well. And just because if somebody is removing your property from the pool that early on, they should pay a privilege for that. And they should pay a premium for that privilege, sorry.
I definitely agree with that one. And it's certainly from my own observation, again, as a user of Beyond Pricing, one of the things we experienced at the start was we'd been underpriced, so we were booked well ahead. So suddenly, for the first couple of months, we weren't getting any bookings, and we were nervous. Of course we were, because we'd been used to getting bookings, but actually all it was doing was funneling those bookings into a slightly tighter window where they were paying the optimum price. Now we've been using it for a long time, we realize that I'm not worried that we aren't booked for September, because I know that we're not in the window to book September yet. And so it's really clever the way it works. Jess, there's a few, we've got a mix of different users today, but there's a few agencies on, because we've got a group with larger, and we've talked about repeat guests and prices. One of the bits of feedback we do get a lot is from owners of the properties. So where the agencies are representing owners, there's a nervousness from owners about increasing the pricing or persuading owners that dynamic pricing is good for them. Have you got any tips for those agencies and their conversations with owners and how they might encourage them to move over to dynamic pricing?
Yeah, that's a good one. And you're not alone. Everybody struggles with this, a lot of agencies struggle with this with their owners. Please do reach out to me at jess@beyondpricing.com if you're in this situation. I'd love to send through some resources that you might be able to tailor to your needs and in your voice, for example, to be able to communicate to your owners. I've helped a few people do that. But I think what we found successful, there's a couple of things. So depending on how large the agency is, people have found success that if they're bringing on new properties or new owners into their pool, by telling them dynamic pricing is how they do things. and they find like new owners who aren't accustomed to having these weekly rates already set for them are much more accepting of the concept. And then they leverage those people who they're able to get to use the program to use as social proof for the owners who are maybe a little bit more hesitant about what this will look like for them, to make sure to be able to demonstrate to them that it works. So that's one, but obviously that's a little bit longer term. Another thing we do sometimes too is we can actually create a login for an owner. I'll just show you here. You can give an owner their own login where they can see all of the prices without actually having the ability to edit the prices. So some people love this, some people hate this, but I think some of the feedback we get is that it's like this black box and nobody understands exactly what a weekly rate would look like in low season. So, you know, you can create a login for them and let them log in and play around, and they can run quotes and then ask questions about specific dates. And we can always help on the support team as well as to, you know, give additional information on why we're pricing the way they are, or that we are. Another thing is, this is where the industry is heading. And so you can either be at the forefront or you can watch it from behind. So depending on the approach that you take with your owners, if you feel comfortable having that conversation, we find success with people, you know, generating excitement about being at the forefront of the industry and talking about things like, you know, obviously the direct booking revolution has come back around, but there are a lot of people who are resistant to Airbnb 10 years ago. And, you know, you may have a strategy where you not using Airbnb works for you, but the fact of the matter is it's like the largest platform globally where people go searching for short lets. And what I do, for example, is I search on Airbnb and then go looking for the direct website. So I kind of use it as an aggregator. But the idea here is that this is where the industry is going. And so it's an exciting thing to be part of. And then I think just reassuring that we have the buffers in place to make sure that, you know, if, for example, they say, I never want to be booked for less than £300 and less than £300 a booking, fine, set that up for them. If they say, you know what, my prices look way too high for Christmas, that's okay. We can put a maximum price in. We don't think they're necessary, and we would much rather, you know, let the tool do what it needs to do to be able to fluctuate around the demand trends we're seeing. But you also have to manage your relationship with the owner. So if it means that, you know what, their version of dynamic pricing is kind of to set a buffer where our suggested pricing sort of ping pongs between perhaps a minimum price that's too high and a maximum price that's too low. If that's what they need to get comfortable with the concept, then that's probably a really great place to start. The other thing we do here too is if you can get them over that hump to sort of ping pong in between these barriers, it's the boundaries, pardon me, is we actually surface here in the tool as well on the stats tab. Well, I haven't started syncing prices, so you can't see it yet, but we surface here, you can see the booking. So you can see these bookings that come in. And so, for example, I really like, if you can convince an owner or if an owner's unsure, and this is what I do with any owners that I onboard, is like we get them up and running and then we monitor the performance of the property. And so if you can see a booking that came in at, you know, 10% higher than last year, share that with them and take the time to sort of celebrate the success. And if there is a booking that comes in a little bit lower than they expected, we could look at the occupancy and say, you know what, in March last year, yes, you're used to getting £200, well, let's say £1,000 a week, but you only booked 2 weeks out of March. Half of March was empty. Like at the current rate and at these prices, we're actually going to be able to book 75, 80% of the available dates in March. So it's okay for some of them to be slightly lower. Anyway, I threw a lot of information at you, but these are some of the things that resonate.
And on that very last point there, one of the, again, drawing on my own experience, there were some instances where our prices were too high, and so we were killing our opportunity to get bookings. So we had greater occupancy in January, February last year before the COVID hit than we ever experienced previously. There's a good comment here from Nicola, and I'm going to share my experience here again, basically commenting that if you only get the minimum price or the minimum price that you set in SuperControl, you're not really getting any benefit. As a user of Beyond Pricing for 18 plus months now, I can assure you our bookings have gone nowhere near minimum prices. The minimum prices we've set are there as a fail safe, but it's gone nowhere near that. The 1% Beyond Pricing fee has been completely lost or absorbed in the gain that we've seen. And that's the comment I get time and time again from owners and agencies. In addition, you're not having to do pricing. You still have to go into Beyond Pricing and tweak it occasionally, but compared to manually doing pricing across a lot of properties, the time saving is just huge. So there's a lot of benefits, but yeah, don't worry about it going to minimum pricing. I would be very surprised if this doesn't increase revenue for everyone. Elaine's asked a question. Yes, if you turn off Beyond Pricing, we can restore that snapshot of prices that we talked about earlier on back to where it was. But I should also add, if you go in and synchronize, and Jess referenced this earlier, your properties into Beyond Pricing, Jess, if you could go and show them how they turn on price syncing. But until you turn on price syncing, you can see all of the suggested pricing, play with it in Beyond Pricing. It's not going to impact SuperControl, and it's not going to overwrite anything in SuperControl. So you can make your mind up without costing yourself anything, and get the confidence in what Beyond Pricing is going to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Everything I've done here, I've done today without sending any information to SuperControl. I established the connection and pulled the property information and historical information through, but then I didn't send anything. The way to start, we can start right now, is you can click on Start Pricing. And then this is my booking sync listing. But in SuperControl, this will show, trigger pushing that information through to SuperControl.
And just to, it does take a few minutes for prices to appear in SuperControl, so don't just jump immediately thinking it will happen. Once you trigger a synchronization like this, or if you make a change, then it'll synchronize. Otherwise, it does it in the early hours every morning, so your prices will change every day, which follows on to a question from Jonathan here about channels. So SuperControl, prices come from Beyond Pricing into SuperControl. SuperControl then distributes out to your connected channels as normal. So your prices on Booking.com, Airbnb, or whatever would also change every day. You can still apply any uplifts you want to on top of that for channels. So if that's what you do, whether you cover the full cost of channel commissions or part of that, or you're uplifting because you can get higher bookings, higher rents on certain channels, then you can do that. The prices, of course, we're looking for optimal prices, and so Beyond Pricing is going to be higher. If you're not getting bookings, then it's going to tweak those prices down. So your uplifts are effectively going to be included in that optimal price. But for those of you who are agencies, it's going to help you with your owner and commission calculations. So those uplifts will always apply on top, as well as any booking fees or extras that you have are going to apply on top of the rent prices that Beyond Pricing sent.
And this is a great point. When you do link your account, you'll see SuperControl. You'll also see like Airbnb, Vrbo, and Booking.com. There's no need to connect these. You just need to connect your SuperControl account. So these are for people who don't use a PMS like SuperControl.
One thing that I find really helpful, and we haven't got much longer, but on the main dashboard, you've got the health score thing, which I wonder if you could take a few seconds to explain that, because I think it's a really useful feature.
Yeah, sure thing. So what this is looking at here, and let's see, a little bit high, but that's not too bad. Okay, so what we're showing here is we are looking at, we're comparing our performance to the market. So what this is telling us is for the next 30 days, in general in the market, people have 45% of their nights booked, and we have 76% booked. So obviously we are overbooked, you know, in reference to this ideal booking window we were talking about earlier. But given the state of the market at the moment, like we'll take anything. So like technically our performance is too high, but this is why our health score is still good. We don't need to make any adjustments here. Like with the pricing that we have set and what's happening in the market at the moment, like we have a good level of bookings. And then here we can see for 90 days, the market's 35% booked and we are 54% booked. So this is looking at over the next 90 days, the level of availability we have. Same thing here, we're a little bit overbooked, but we'd always rather be a little bit overbooked than underbooked at the moment. And so this is a great way to get a quick snapshot of how your listing is performing. And actually, I'm just mindful of the time and I really want to show this group how to use some of our filters. And this is a great example of what I would set a filter for. So we have these filters here, and if you are an agency or if you have sort of more than 1 or 2 listings, this can be really helpful to create groups of properties that you can keep an eye on. So one filter I like to use here, if you click on more filters, you can filter by all sorts of things. But what I like to do is, okay, I'm filtering by poor health score. So all of these are my listings that have a poor health score. So, the market is 27% booked for this size listing in this location for the next 30 days, and we're 0% booked. So obviously we need to make some adjustments here to capture some of these bookings. So what I like to do is set a filter for my poor listings, save the filter to like poor health score 25 March and click save. And so then what I can do here is I can go and adjust the price. So, we're getting 0 bookings. So it looks like we're probably overpriced. So I'm actually going to take this down by 10% and save the prices here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in a week's time and come into this filter here and look at my groups of filters. And I'm going to take a look at my poor health scores from the 25th of March. And then I can see here how my properties, or if my properties have improved over the week since I made the adjustments to the listings. So this is the way I really like to use filters, to be able to sort of track the performance in conjunction with the health score. But you can filter by all sorts of things here, like base price, number of bedrooms, the markets they're in. So yeah, I wanted to bring your attention here to filters. And then another cool thing that you can do if you have lots of listings is use our bulk actions tool. So if you come up here, you can switch from card view to table view. And so what you can see here is that filter that I applied is still applying to my listings here. And now we can edit these in bulk. So if you click here to select them and click edit 3 listings, so you saw me go in and like reduce the base price on one of them, for example, but let's say we want to increase our last minute discounts. We want to try and get some more bookings in the next week. So we're going to put a 50% last minute discount in for all of these properties. Now I've only got 3 here, but you could go in one by one, or you could come here and do these adjustments in bulk. So we can come here and we can say, I'm going to decrease the price by 50% for the next 14 days. And then if we click Save Changes here, you can see that it will actually apply those changes to the 3 listings that you've selected. So this is a great way to be able to quickly adjust a lot of things for a lot of listings. And, I picked last minute discounts, but basically anything that you can adjust in the tool can be done in bulk here. And another way I really like to do this too is, let's say you have one property that you've set up that has exactly the settings that you want to apply to all of your properties that have a bad health score, or all of your properties in Hiroshima, or all of your properties that have 4 bedrooms. You can come in here and click import details, and then you can actually pick the property where you've set up what you want your listings to look like. You can click import, and then here you can expand and you can see all of the settings that have been imported for this listing. So let's say we want to use the last minute discount schema that we have here, like we were just talking about. Let's say we want to reset it back to these defaults. We click here, and then if we click Save Changes, it will confirm that we're going to apply these settings to all of these properties. So this is a really great way to kind of use a combination of filters and bulk actions to be able to quickly make changes to your properties. I feel like maybe some questions came in, but I'm mindful of the time.
I am answering one of the questions directly now.
Okay, great. Well, there's one thing I didn't get to cover, so I just want to go there, but feel free to interrupt me, Robert or Jesse. When I was talking about having these settings, we looked at the minimum price here, but I also just wanted to show you that you can set a seasonal minimum price. For example, earlier we showed how to manually override a price in the property, in the calendar, but the issue with this is if the demand does change and it goes above that suggested price, we will not shift the pricing in line with that because we're adhering to the value that you have set in the calendar. But let's say, for example, for Christmas, your owner likes to stay at their property, but if they can book it out for the week on an average of £200 a night, they'll take the booking. So what we can do here is we can set a £200 minimum price just for this week. Click on Save Changes. And then what we can see here, if we go back into the calendar, and if we scroll down to Christmas, oh, I went too far. We can see here that for the week of Christmas, on Christmas Day itself, you can see the last factor here is that it's actually been raised to our seasonal minimum price. So our suggested price would be just below £200. But then you can see on the 31st, where we have set a minimum price of £200, we're actually suggesting 207. So here, this is just an example where you could use this to kind of set a floor, but then also allow dynamic pricing to continue to work above and beyond that. Now, obviously, it's still a high minimum price, and so it's higher than we would recommend. So it might have an impact on the ability to get booked. But in this sort of scenario where, an owner wants a specific rate, this can be a really good way to achieve that.
I'm conscious that we're very nearly at time. Melanie, you've asked about bookings coming from another account. I will email you and reference that one. It's a bit detailed to go into now. Alice, you've asked, can you set your current prices as the base rate? So as we've said, you can put all sorts of guardrails in place to make sure that you are not going to sell too cheaply, but going back to my own experience and pretty much all the experiences of people that I've spoken to, you don't need to worry, especially in the current climate, about things being too cheap. It's likely that you will see significant increases on the prices you have had previously. And Jenny, you've asked, do you have a crib sheet? So there is great documentation in the in SuperControl Help Center, but in particular in the Beyond Pricing Help Center. So if you go into your account, here we go.
If you type in SuperControl, we've got some great stuff here.
So those first two articles, one is a real how to set it up, and the second one is referencing those short breaks, the percentages that we talked about earlier, and that's got some really good information in there. It really is very easy to set up. It is, you should be up and running very, very quickly if you haven't done it already. And as we've said, you there's no risk to pressing the button and looking, and you will see what the prices are going to be suggested.
And just quickly, Robert, if you do accidentally turn price posting on, I just want to show you, you click on the down arrow here and click on turn price posting off, and you can pick one of these options to turn it off. Just wanted to highlight that that's where that is. And it's quite easy to do. And I'm just going to go back to our slide for just a moment. We didn't really use these, but I do want to finish here. If you haven't tried it, I really encourage you to sign up beyondpricing.com. and have a go, play around, change the prices. And as long as you don't click start syncing, nothing will be impacted in your SuperControl account. If that does happen, you can always revert back to your snapshot here too. And wait, where did I go here? We have a follow-up session next week too, where we can address any questions. But I also want to be mindful that as you're playing with it, you might have questions. So you're more than welcome to reach out to myself or our support team at support@beyondpricing.com with any questions, and we'd be happy to help answer them.
Great. Well, thank you both again. And hopefully, if any of you've got more questions, there's a couple more Beyond Pricing small group sessions like this over the next couple of weeks. And hopefully there will be a chance to dig into some of the more advanced stuff. There's a lot of information and data in Beyond Pricing that we haven't even looked at today. So once you've got up and running, then you can start to get into some more interesting and detailed things. I'm aware that there's a couple of questions that we haven't answered, but I will email a couple of those, and so hopefully we will be able to answer them. But please join one of those other sessions, and we will dig into more detailed questions as well. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Jess and Jessie for helping again. And any questions, just let us know.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Robert.
Bye.
Bye.